Hello and welcome to the AUSTRAC Reporting Entity Forum. My name is Nick, and joining me today is Belinda and Shabona. We are from the Industry Education and Outreach team at AUSTRAC. Firstly, AUSTRAC acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their continuing connection to land, sea, and community. I pay my respects to elders past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. Thank you all for taking the time to join us. The purpose of this forum is to help you improve your AML/CTF compliance by providing sector-specific insights, addressing common challenges, and offering practical guidance. Before we begin, we do have a few housekeeping items to address. While this webinar is designed to highlight some key regulatory insights that may be relevant to your business, it does not constitute as legal advice. Should you need to do so, we encourage you to obtain your own independent professional advice specific to your business and individual needs. This webinar should not replace or form part of your staff AML/CTF risk awareness training program. And finally, while we will be providing a brief update on the upcoming reforms, please keep in mind that this is not the focus of this webinar. AML/CTF rules and associated guidance are still in development, and AUSTRAC will provide education on this in details as more details become available. So, in today's session, we will explore several topics, which includes a brief update on the upcoming AML/CTF reforms, AUSTRAC's regulatory priorities, insight from the regulatory supervision team, including common compliance challenges observed across the sector and their future focus for supervision work, an update from the enforcement team, sharing insights into AUSTRAC's enforcement activity and how we respond to non-compliance. And finally, a look at 2024 compliance report data and how this may shape AUSTRAC's priority. Before I hand you over to Belinda, I'd like to take a moment to think about why you are here and what would you like to take away from this session. I encourage you, while you're listening to each speaker, to think about whether your business is meeting AUSTRAC's expectation in these areas. If yes, are there areas that you can improve on? And if your business isn't meeting AUSTRAC's expectations, what are you going to do when you go back to your business to improve your AML/CTF processes? To kick off today's session, we'll start with a brief update on the AML/CTF reforms, what it means for you, and what's coming up next. To walk us through, I'll hand you over to Belinda for these.
Thanks, Nick. As I'm sure you're all aware, Australia's anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing, otherwise known as AML/CTF regime, is undergoing reforms. These reforms are indicative of the Australian government's commitment to protecting the integrity of the Australian financial system and improving our AML/CTF regime. To this end, the AML/CTF Amendment Bill was passed in November 2024, amending the AML/CTF Act and progressing the simplification and modernisation of the AML/CTF Act, regulations and rules. One key objective of the reforms is to expand regulation to Tranche 2 entities. These include lawyers, accountants, trust and company service providers, dealers in precious metals and stones, and real estate professionals. Services provided by these sectors are recognised globally as high risk for exploitation, but are not captured under the current AML/CTF regime. For existing reporting entities, such as yourselves, the reforms also aim to increase flexibility, reduce regulatory burden, and improve clarity by making key terms, obligations, and terminology more consistent across the AML/CTF Act and the rules. This simplified framework is designed to help you better understand your obligations and strengthen your ability to detect and prevent financial crime. The reforms also aim to modernise the regime so it remains fit for purpose in a rapidly changing financial environment. The reforms expand the risk-based approach, allowing flexibility as businesses continue to evolve. As part of this process, AML-CTF program requirements are set to change, moving away from ticker box compliance. The reforms will also better define the roles and responsibilities of a reporting entity's governing body and AML-CTF compliance officer, further supporting stronger oversight and suitability. The Financial Action Task Force, known as the FATF, is the global money laundering, terrorist, and proliferation financing watchdog. Influenced by the FATF, global AML-CTF regulation is inherently risk-based. Their first recommendation is to identify, assess, and understand risk. Almost all AML-CTF obligations flow from this. As mentioned earlier, the updated requirements will place a much stronger emphasis on the need for meaningful, risk-based controls. One of the key changes is the introduction of proliferation financing. Proliferation financing is when a person makes an asset available, provides a financial service, or conducts a financial transaction that is intended to facilitate the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, regardless of whether the activity occurs or is attempted. While some of you may have already been considering your proliferation financing risks, the reforms now expressly require this. It will now also be expressly required that reporting entities assess their money laundering, terrorism financing, and proliferation financing risks as part of their AML-CTF program. While you may have already been doing this in practice, this change formalises that expectation and reinforces that your risk assessment must be the foundation of your AML-CTF compliance program. There are other structural changes to the AML-CTF program under the reforms, such as moving away from having a Part A and Part B program and a requirement for you to create and maintain appropriate AML-CTF policies to manage and mitigate the specific risks identified in your business. Beyond the content and structure of your AML-CTF program, the reforms also address practical elements, such as strengthening governance frameworks. The reforms will require you to have a governing body, senior management, and AML-CTF compliance officer, and the legislation will clearly define these roles. The governing body and senior management will be required to provide ongoing, effective oversight of the business's AML-CTF compliance and risk management activities. And while the obligation to have an AML-CTF compliance officer is not new, the reforms place a stronger emphasis on the suitability of individuals in these roles. This will mean that the person appointed to this role must meet specific fit and proper requirements to ensure they have the necessary expertise, integrity, and seniority to fulfill these responsibilities effectively. More information on the AML-CTF compliance officer will be determined through ongoing consultation on the rules. You may have also seen in the amendment bill that independent reviews or evaluations will be required to be conducted at least every 3 years. This does not mean that 3 years will be appropriate for all businesses. The frequency with which evaluations must be conducted must still be appropriate to the nature, size, and complexity of the business. The rules will also clarify the requirements around the conduct of independent reviews. Finally, a core objective of the reforms is ensuring obligations are clear and reflect contemporary business. This is particularly evident in a number of targeted changes, covering obligations like customer due diligence, international value transfer service reports, value transfer chains, and tipping off. To summarise, You will have seen this clarity achieved in the reforms to the tipping off offence, which came into effect on the 31st of March this year. The changes now focus on whether disclosing information would or could reasonably be expected to prejudice an investigation. This new harm prevention approach shifts the focus from compliance to risk and reduces unintended compliance challenges or regulatory burden. There will also be changes to customer due diligence requirements to ensure a more targeted and flexible approach, focusing on outcomes that help mitigate risks associated with higher risk customers and transactions. The reforms clarify and simplify customer due diligence obligations, reinforcing that customer due diligence is an ongoing process. These changes will also clarify the level of checks applied to each customer initially and on an ongoing basis. They outline expectations around customer risk rating, initial customer due diligence, ongoing customer due diligence, and enhanced customer due diligence. International Value Transfer Service reports will replace the current International Funds Transfer Instructions reports, otherwise known as IFTIs. The reporting obligation will now lie with the reporting entity closest to the Australian customer, better reflecting how these businesses function in practice. These changes will come into effect on the 31st of March 2026. I'll now hand over to Nick to discuss AUSTRAC's regulatory priorities.
Thanks, Belinda. So let's turn our focus now to AUSTRAC's current regulatory priorities and how they shape our engagement with industry. While the reforms provide insight into the future of the regime, our day-to-day work is guided by the risk and issues we are seeing across the reporting entity population now. These priorities shape how we engage with industry, where we focus our supervisory efforts, and how we support reporting entities to strengthen their compliance. In 2023, AUSTRAC published our regulatory priorities for the first time, outlining our focus areas for strengthening AUSTRAC's financial system's resilience to money laundering, terrorism financing, and other serious crimes. These priorities are structured around 5 key themes. The first is our enduring priorities, which includes core areas of compliance such as AML/CTF programs, MLTF risk assessments, reporting obligations, and high-risk sectors. The second is an increased focus on emerging and high-growth sectors. This applies to digital currency exchange or virtual assets, payment platforms, bullion, and non-bank lenders and financiers. The third priority is serious and systemic deficiencies. This theme relates to compliance failures in key areas including board and executive accountability, transaction monitoring programs, and the outsourcing of AML/CTF functions. The fourth priority is continuous improvement, which will modernize and improve Australia's AML/CTF regime. The Australian government has reiterated this through the legislative reforms currently underway. And the final priority is partnerships, building and maturing strong relationships with a wide range of partners across industry, government, and law enforcement to support our regulatory objectives. These regulatory priorities aren't just high-level goals. They directly influence the way AUSTRAC approaches supervision. They help shape our engagement with industry, inform where we've focused our attention, and guide how we assess and respond to compliance behaviors. To provide more insight into these priorities and how they have been implemented, I'll hand you over to Shabona, who will share some of the regulatory team's recent supervisory work, key observations, and area of focus going forward.
Thanks, Nick. I'm here today to provide you with an overview of some of the proactive work that AUSTRAC has conducted toward the NBLF sector recently, sharing the common issues and main takeaways that were identified from this work. I will also go into key areas the team will be focusing on over the next 12 months. But firstly, let me address some of the public disclosures that AUSTRAC has made recently regarding the NBLF sector. As many of you should be aware, we issued a detailed and extensive letter to your sector on the 14th of May, following our recent campaign into the NBLF sector. Crucially, this document described numerous findings from our work, including our concerns and what our expectations are for businesses in the NBLF sector going forward. This document was sent out by our external communications area to the email address listed on your AUSTRAC registration. It is our expectation that this document has been or is being formally reviewed by your organisation to determine whether your AML-CTF program and systems are currently compliant and effective in practice. Additionally, a public media release was issued on the same day with respect to the appointment of an external auditor to Mercedes-Benz Financial Services through the use of our powers under Section 162 of the AML-CTF Act. Much of the corresponding language in this media release echoed what was included in our letter to the sector. As stated, both of these pieces were highly specific in detailing our concerns and expectations going forward for the sector. As such, today's session will be largely reiterating and emphasising the key points from these pieces of work. So let's start by taking a look at one of AUSTRAC's key regulatory activities over the past year. Namely, last year, we commenced a supervisory campaign with the aim of understanding how businesses and organisations within the NBLF sector were complying with the AML-CTF Act and the rules. The campaign began with a questionnaire, followed by in-person meetings with a number of these entities. And prior to these in-person meetings, we performed thorough reviews of the relevant organisations' AML-CTF programs and risk assessments. So during the meetings, real-time feedback was provided where appropriate. Subsequently, entities of particular concern were identified, all of whom had serious and systemic deficiencies in meeting their obligations. These entities have been subjected to further regulatory engagement on a one-on-one basis, the most serious of which has involved the appointment of an external auditor under Section 162 of the AML-CTF Act, as I mentioned earlier. I'm now going to share with you some insights from what AUSTRAC has identified about the NBLF sector through our recent regulatory activities. And as I share this information with you, I strongly encourage you to consider whether what I'm saying rings true for your organisation's AML-CTF program. The first key area for improvement relates to awareness of MLTF risk. AUSTRAC's recent campaign identified that many entities had not reviewed the NBLF money laundering and terrorism financing risk assessment, which was issued in 2021. More concerningly, a significant number weren't even aware of its existence. The purpose of the risk assessment was to provide specific information to your sector in relation to its MLTF risks, with the primary aim being to assist NBLF reporting entities in identifying and mitigating MLTF risks to Australia's financial system. There is a considerable amount of useful and relevant information in this document, ranging from the criminal threat environment to unique vulnerabilities that your businesses in the NBLF sector face. If you have not reviewed the risk assessment, it is our expectation that you do so promptly, and where relevant, incorporate this into your AML-CTF program. The second key area for improvement relates to suspicious matter reporting and high-risk customers. According to AUSTRAC's records, approximately 87% of entities within your sector did not submit a suspicious matter report, or SMR, in the 2024 calendar year. And more concerningly for AUSTRAC, over half of the SMRs submitted to AUSTRAC during this period were from only 2 entities. AUSTRAC's findings suggest that some entities would benefit from additional clarity in understanding what reasonable grounds for suspicion looks like in the context of suspicious matter reporting. So in short, reasonable grounds means that after considering all the information and circumstances available, a reasonable person would conclude there is a suspicion. Crucially, in our view, this does not mean you need to possess evidence that a crime has or is taking place for it to be reportable. When faced with these judgments, we would encourage entities to fall on the side of reporting an SMR over not, as the information contained within these submissions can and often does provide critical intelligence to AUSTRAC and its partner agencies in its work. A common concern we hear from industry is that submitting SMRs or rating customers as high risk will cause your business to be viewed negatively by AUSTRAC or by law enforcement. This is not the case. Rather, in many cases, the submission of quality SMRs and the identification of high-risk customers demonstrates you are monitoring for risks and have a well-functioning and effective AML-CTF program. You must report any suspicion of terrorism financing within 24 hours from the time suspicion is formed. And if the suspicion relates to any other matters such as money laundering or other suspected crimes, you must report it within 3 business days. We would also encourage you to have reasonably firm service line agreements or SLAs for any inquiries undertaken to determine whether a suspicion should be formed. This means ensuring that your transaction monitoring program alerts are attended to in a consistent, structured, and timely manner. We strongly recommend that you review the guidance on suspicious matter reporting, including the new tipping off guidance on the AUSTRAC website. You will also find other useful resources, including an SMR checklist, which has key details you need to consider for effective suspicious matter reporting. Our third key area for improvement is processes for managing high-risk customers and ECDD, which directly links to your ability to meet your obligation to report suspicious matters. So firstly, the identification of high-risk customers. AUSTRAC's records indicate that approximately 89% of entities within your sector reported to have no high-risk customers. We are highly concerned with this figure and strongly suspect it is principally a function of many entities not having adequate systems in place to identify and manage high-risk customers, rather than simply not encountering any high-risk customers. A common theme in AUSTRAC's engagement with the NBLF sector was the position that customers which have passed the onboarding checks are, by definition, low risk. This is, generally speaking, an incorrect approach. You do not need to be in possession of evidence or information that the customer in question has committed or is likely to commit an offence to consider them high risk. It may be that one or a series of red flags emerge with respect to the customer that results in them being placed into a high-risk category. These red flags might include unusual requests, the involvement of third parties, unusual transactions, unexplained wealth, or other factors. Further, having high-risk customers is in no way an indictment on your business so long as you have adequate systems in place to manage and mitigate the elevated risk posed by these customers. One way to ensure a consistent approach to determining customer risk ratings is to have clearly defined policies and procedures in your AML-CTF program around what constitutes a low and high risk customer, in addition to what falls outside of your risk appetite. Moving on to customer risk rating. Customer risk ratings also need to be dynamic through the entire customer lifecycle. For example, customers which have been onboarded as low risk should have their risk rating re-evaluated should additional information be uncovered. This will most commonly be due to the relevant customer undertaking transactions which are flagged by your organization's transaction monitoring program, or through direct engagement with the customer which is later deemed to be suspicious. Adverse media searches or a change in PEP status are other common triggers for a customer's risk rating to be reassessed. On the flip side, a customer onboarded as high risk can have their risk rating downgraded. Similar to my prior points, having well-defined systems and processes to customer risk ratings is pivotal to ensure a consistent and structured approach. Now, this brings me to ECDD. If you determine a customer poses a high MLTF risk, then you must deploy your Enhanced Customer Due Diligence Program, or ECDD for short. Your ECDD program must be documented in your AML-CTF program. AUSTRAC expects entities to detail clear and tailored ECDD trigger scenarios, which are defined and applicable throughout the entire customer relationship, as opposed to being limited to onboarding, which was commonly observed. In our work, we also observed on many occasions that entities' ECDD triggers were broad and loosely structured, and that control measures were often not being tailored to the specific trigger circumstances. I strongly recommend that you review the guidance regarding your ECDD obligations on the AUSTRAC website. The fourth key area for improvement relates to transaction monitoring programs, or TMPs. The campaign identified a number of concerns with regards to entities' TMPs in the NBLF sector. Namely, many businesses' TMPs omitted monitoring of obvious risks, such as third parties depositing payments. Many businesses had never reviewed or otherwise calibrated their TMP alert settings. Many businesses reviewed only a small fraction of overall TMP alerts generated by their TMP. Many businesses lacked documented processes to investigate alerts, such as failing to detail SLAs with concrete timeframes for investigating alerts. A significant portion of the businesses that were engaged with during our campaign met a portion of this list, and some met all of it. And AUSTRAC suspects that our observations are likely indicative of a broader trend across the sector. To be clear, your organisation cannot appropriately manage and mitigate its MLTF risk without an effective TMP. To this point, you must document how you monitor customer transactions in your AML-CTF program. Your transaction monitoring program must be based on your risk assessment of your business and define the processes you follow to investigate alerts that are raised. You should allocate appropriate resources and give priority to analysing and actioning alerts raised by transaction monitoring. You must have clear and documented processes within your AML-CTF program to ensure there is a consistent and structured approach to the review of TMP alerts. This is including, but not limited to, SLAs for the investigation of alerts and the nature of inquiries made in relation to each specific alert. You must review at defined intervals your TMP and update its settings to adapt to any emerging risks, new typologies, and regulatory changes. So I recommend that you visit the AUSTRAC website for up-to-date guidance on TMPs. Taken collectively, it is our expectation that our various public disclosures, including this session, will trigger a material uplift in how businesses in the NBLF sector manage and mitigate their MLTF risk. This means that we expect the sector to collectively report more SMRs than what we currently observe, and to identify more high-risk customers. Much of this increase we expect to happen from current businesses which have to date not lodged a single SMR with us, in addition to businesses which will naturally increase their level of reporting. We will monitor the data as it becomes available to us in the weeks and months ahead. We will also continue to work directly with businesses as they undertake independent reviews, remediation, and capability uplifts. Now, looking ahead, AUSTRAC's regulatory supervision teams will continue to focus on ensuring reporting entities maintain risk-based and fit-for-purpose AML/CTF programs, monitoring how businesses are adapting their programs to respond to changes in their products, services, customer base, or risk environment, supporting improvements in the quality and relevance of MLTF risk assessments, assessing the effectiveness of transaction monitoring programs and the ability of entities to detect and report suspicious activity, and reviewing how entities apply enhanced customer due diligence measures and manage higher risk relationships and transactions. We will also maintain a strong focus on entities' governance and oversight arrangements, particularly the role of the boards, senior management, and AML/CTF compliance officers in ensuring programs are properly maintained and adapted to emerging risks. AUSTRAC's approach remains risk-based, intelligence-led, and outcomes-focused. We encourage all reporting entities to take a proactive approach to compliance. Review your systems and controls regularly and ensure they are fit for purpose in a rapidly evolving risk environment. By maintaining strong AML/CTF programs and engaging openly with AUSTRAC, you contribute directly to safeguarding Australia's financial system and protecting the broader community. I hope this has given you a clearer sense of the key themes we are seeing across the reporting entity population and how AUSTRAC is working with industry to strengthen compliance outcomes. I'll now hand back over to Nick to continue with today's session.
Thank you so much, Shobana, for that overview of AUSTRAC's recent supervisory work and the practical insights you have shared. While supervision plays a key role in helping reporting entities strengthen their compliance, there are times when more serious or systemic issues require a stronger response. With that in mind, we'll now hear from Belinda, who will provide an update on AUSTRAC's enforcement activity, key themes we are seeing in non-compliance matters, and what to expect going forward.
Thanks, Nick. If reporting entities do not meet their obligations under the AML/CTF law, AUSTRAC can take steps to compel their compliance and/or seek a penalty. Enforcement actions are specific legal actions we can take to make sure reporting entities comply with the law. Enforcement actions available to AUSTRAC are civil penalty orders, enforceable undertakings, infringement notices, and remedial directions. Another type of action AUSTRAC can take is to issue a written notice requiring a reporting entity to appoint an external auditor to review your MLTF risk management or AML/CTF compliance, or undertake a MLTF financing risk assessment. We can also refuse, cancel, or suspend the registration of remittance service providers and digital currency exchange providers if they pose an unacceptable risk of money laundering, terrorism financing, and other serious crime. Over the past year, AUSTRAC has continued to use its full range of regulatory tools, including enforcement powers where necessary to respond to non-compliance and uphold public confidence in Australia's financial system. While we like to be transparent about our enforcement outcomes, it's important to note that not all investigations have progressed to the point of public outcome. So today, I will only speak to matters that are already in the public domain. We recognise that threats are evolving and controls won't always catch everything. But compliance failures in the AML/CTF regime can contribute to significant real-world harm, and where harm has occurred or where the risk of harm has been materially increased by the failures, reporting entities should expect AUSTRAC to act accordingly. Recently, AUSTRAC undertook significant enforcement action against several entities for failing to comply with their obligations under the AML/CTF Act. One of the more prominent matters involved a casino operator, where enforcement action led to a substantial civil penalty. The casino operator was found to have failed to meet customer due diligence requirements and had systemic weaknesses in its risk management and controls. As a result, the federal court ordered the casino operator to pay a substantial penalty. The decision was based on findings of serious breaches of the AML-CTF Act, particularly around ongoing customer due diligence and systemic control failures. These weaknesses allowed high-risk customers to move large sums of money through the casino's operations over several years, obscuring the origin and ownership of these funds. The casino operator also provided services through high-risk channels and to high-risk customers without implementing necessary risk-based controls. As a result, they failed to conduct required checks on a significant number of customers, including individuals known to law enforcement or presenting indicators of potential money laundering risk. This outcome highlights the importance of establishing and maintaining a robust risk-based AML-CTF program, not just to avoid substantial penalties, but to protect the integrity of your operations and reputation over the long term. Looking ahead, serious and systemic non-compliance, particularly regarding foundational obligations such as risk-based customer due diligence, will remain a focus of AUSTRAC's enforcement work. In an environment of evolving threats, we recognise that some degree of failure is inevitable. Controls won't always hold up, and we accept that. But we're still seeing, in too many cases, basic obligations not being carried out effectively or at all, and unpersuasive proof that the business is taking reasonable steps to reach compliance. It's important to remember AML-CTF is not a set and forget regime. You need to ask, how does MLTF risk actually play out in your business? Where are the real vulnerabilities? How are you monitoring whether your controls are working? And what happens when they're not? The AML-CTF regime is not designed to eliminate all financial crime. It's about taking reasonable, evidence-based measures to identify, manage, and mitigate risk. That means that you need to explore a tailored and proactive approach. There is no one-size-fits-all solution. While we recognise that occasional failures may occur, it's critical that when these issues are identified, they're addressed promptly. Open, proactive communication with AUSTRAC, particularly where significant compliance concerns arise, is the most effective way to mitigate broader consequences. We saw this approach in practice recently when AUSTRAC accepted an enforceable undertaking from a corporate bookmaker following an extensive supervisory assessment. The corporate bookmaker demonstrated willingness to cooperate and proactively address its obligations. Therefore, AUSTRAC determined accepting an enforceable undertaking from the corporate bookmaker was the most appropriate regulatory response. This matter highlights the importance of collaboration, transparency, and early action in supporting compliance outcomes. In contrast, a culture which encourages avoidance or compliance window dressing will also be a focus of AUSTRAC's enforcement work. By proactively engaging with AUSTRAC and strengthening your compliance frameworks, you directly contribute to safeguarding Australia's financial environment. With that, I'll hand back to Nick to continue with today's session.
Thanks, Belinda, for that update. It's a strong reminder that while AUSTRAC understands the challenges of managing financial crime risk, there's a clear expectation that reporting entities are actively identifying, addressing, and learning from gaps in their programs. Finally, I'd like to take this opportunity to give you a brief overview of our initial insights from the 2024 compliance report data. As reporting entities, most of you are required to submit a compliance report to AUSTRAC each year, answering questions about how you have met your AML/CTF obligations. The information gathered from the compliance report provides a key data inputs for our risk modeling of reporting entities and sector as a whole. It helps us understand how you are tracking with your obligations, where there are areas of strengths, and where some gaps may still remain. It also helps inform how we define our regulatory priorities and tailor our engagement and support going forward. As many of you will know, the reporting period for the 2024 compliance report only closed 31st of March, so we are still deep in the analysis at the moment. However, a few early trends have already emerged, and they align closely with the themes we've touched on today. To begin with, it's worth noting a positive outcome from the 2024 compliance report period, with 84% of reporting entities who have the compliance reporting obligation completed their 2024 compliance report, which is up from 82% last year. It's encouraging to see an increase in the engagement across the population. As mentioned, the data you provide gives us vital insights into how the regime is working, helping us shape guidance, identifying gaps, and tailor our support where it's most needed. Ultimately, the more complete and accurate data we receive, the better we are placed to help you meet your obligations and protect your business from risk. Moving on to risk assessments. While it's encouraging to see 54% of non-bank lenders and financiers reviewed or updated their MLTF risk assessment in 2024, only 9% of them indicated they did so in response to AUSTRAC engagement, guidance, or feedback. While we acknowledge that not every AUSTRAC engagement will require a full reassessment of your risk profile, this number suggests that many entities may be missing opportunities to adapt their programs in response to regulatory or environmental challenges. For example, AUSTRAC published its National Risk Assessment on Money Laundering and Terrorism Financing this past year. These risks assessments should be used by entities to review and update their risk assessments. AUSTRAC presented sector-specific webinars to communicate the findings of these risk assessments at that time, and you can find the recordings of these sessions on the AUSTRAC YouTube channel. As you will recall from earlier, ECDD is required in a range of high-risk scenarios. However, we continue to see evidence of inconsistent application of ECDD controls, particularly around senior management oversight. Out of the 78% of non-bank lenders and financiers that reported to conduct ECDD in 2024, only 60% sought senior management approval to provide a designated service, and only 61% sought senior management approval to continue with a high-risk customer relationship. These figures suggest that escalation protocols may not be working effectively, or that decision-making is not being documented in line with entities' obligations. When it comes to reporting obligations, we know that timely, accurate reports are one of the most valuable contributions entities can make to the broader AML/CTF regime. However, compliance report responses continue to show variability in how these obligations are being met, particularly around systems and controls that support detection and escalation. This has a flow-on effect on governance and oversight of your framework. For example, 58% of non-bank lenders and financiers that confirmed they outsource one or more of their AML/CTF obligations said they provide reporting to their board or senior management on the performance of those outsourced functions. Given that outsourcing is relatively common, with 51% of non-bank lenders and financiers stating that they outsourced one or more of their compliance functions. This highlights the need for stronger governance around outsourced arrangements to ensure oversight and accountability remains in-house. Finally, let's talk about transaction monitoring. The data currently shows that 50% of your sector identified suspicious activity via staff, while 37% identified it through their transaction monitoring program. This alone tells us there's room to improve programs' effectiveness. But what's particularly important to highlight here is that entities that reviewed their TMP in the past year were more than twice as likely to detect suspicious activity, with 48% of those who had reviewed their TMP making a detection, compared to just 22% of those who had not. So this reinforces a critical point. Much like your AML/CTF program as a whole, your transaction monitoring program is also not set and forget. Ongoing tuning, testing, and adaptation are essential to ensuring that TMPs remain aligned with your risk profile and capable of detecting suspicious activity in real time. Altogether, these insights help us say where improvement is happening and where there's still work to be done. And the data reflects many of these themes we spoke about earlier: the need for tailored risk assessments, consistent application of customer due diligence, clear governance, and effective systems and controls. We will continue to use this data to inform our regulatory focus and support activities, and we encourage you to reflect on how these insights might apply to your own program and practices. So this brings us to the end of today's forum. Thank you all for joining us today, and we hope you found this session valuable. Thanks again.